Today on New Stripe City, we're going to do something new and do a positional breakdown for the Bengals versus Steelers on this episode of New Stripe City. Welcome to New Stripe City, a YouTube channel for diehard Bengals fans. I'm your host, Ace Boogie. Be sure to subscribe and like this video. Let's get into it. We're starting off at the quarterback position. I think this one is pretty obvious. The edge has to go to Andy Dalton. Although I'm not the biggest Andy Dalton fan, Mason Rudolph just does not look like the answer right now, especially coming off of the heels of the 49ers game. The offense has been very stagnant, so I'm going to give that to the Bengals. At running back, we have two similar scenarios here, as both guys are amazing, but both have struggled. But I'm going to slightly give the edge to the Bengals with Joe Mixon, as he has kind of got on track a little bit last week. But it's pretty near even with James Conner being there, especially with that offensive line. It will really rely on what Mason Rudolph can actually do from the position. At wide receiver, I'm going to give the edge to the Bengals. The reason why, John Ross, Tyler Boyd, Auden Tate, amongst others, but they seem to have a more consistent wide receiver core outside of the Steelers only really having Juju Smith-Schuster, who hasn't really proven that he's a number one receiver. If you look at his stats, very similar to Tyler Boyd's, and there's no one, absolutely no one after him that has stepped up to be the guy. Ryan Switzer isn't it, and neither has Dante Moncrief. On terms of the offensive line, that edge definitely goes to the Steelers. They're a way better offensive line than the Bengals. The Bengals, that's probably their biggest weakness, especially with Cordy Glenn being out at the moment. Shifting gears to tight end, I also have the Bengals having this advantage, especially with Vance McDonald out. The Steelers did trade for Nick Vannett, who's mostly a blocking tight end, but I feel the fact that the Bengals have C.J. Uzomah, Tyler Eifert, Drew Sample, they should have the edge here, and especially with Vance McDonald being out possibly with a shoulder injury, with his arm being in a sling, that could really bode well for the Bengals. This was kind of one of the easiest decisions for me to make, being that Nick Vannett is just going to be there for a first week. I expect him to block a lot. On the defensive line, my biggest surprise here, I'm actually going to go with the Steelers, and I'll tell you why. The Steelers have been pretty stout against the run and really looked good against the San Francisco offensive line. The Bengals obviously didn't do that, and also Sam Hubbard is injured as well as Carl Lawson, and with those two guys being question marks, I have to give the advantage to the Steelers, although Andrew Billings, Geno Atkins, and Carlos Dunlap have been formidable. At the linebacker position, this is actually closer than a lot of people believe it or not. Devin Bush has struggled. Now, according to PFF, he struggled, but I think just from the eye test, he looks like he's a guy that's a playmaker. So that is why I'm going to give them the slight edge. However, Preston Brown has not played as bad according to PFF. He's actually played better, but in my opinion, I don't really buy into that, so I'm going to give it to the Steelers. In the secondary, the Steelers recently acquired Minkah Fitzpatrick, who PFF said played pretty normal there, but I'm going to say that this is going to be somewhat of an even matchup because the Bengals have a guy in Darius Phillips who's on the way up, but they've also had their share of struggles from Drake Kirkpatrick to Jesse Bates as well, so I think that makes this even in terms of the secondary. So if one of these secondaries can step it up, we'll see what happens. But I think right now it's pretty even between the two. So just to recap, I've got quarterback advantage Bengals, wide receiver advantage Bengals, running back advantage Bengals, offensive line advantage Steelers, tight end advantage Bengals, defensive line advantage Steelers, linebacker advantage Steelers, secondary even. So I think that this will be a pretty close game, especially that it's a divisional rivalry. 2 0-3 teams fighting to try to claw back into the AFC North race. That's all I have. Let me know in the comments if you guys like this, and I'll continue doing them going forward. And as usual, I'll leave you with a who day all day, every day, and especially on Sunday.